It's a really casual chat, all right?
So we don't look at the camera, we just look at each other?
I don't think we need to look at the camera.
Yeah.
No. It's a real casual chat.
Sounds good.
We'll talk a bit about this together, and then we'll talk about your photography and anything else, all right?
Cool.
Okay, so, all right, 1, 2, 3. Hey everybody, welcome to our next episode of The Landscape. I'm here at a gallery here in Flinders Lane, 45 downstairs. It's number 45 Flinders Lane, surprise, surprise. And I'm here with two great mates of mine, Adam Williams and Ignacio Palacios, something or other.
Yeah, that's correct.
Will that do?
Yeah.
I've got no idea. I've only just met this bloke. This is like what happens on Facebook and social media, right? I've only met you last night and yet we've known each other for years, so that's what happens. And Adam has just come down from Uluru to be here.
Flying in from Uluru, yeah.
He's on an 18 month trip around Australia with his family, and he just flew in, what a legend, last night in order to be here. So welcome.
Thank you.
We are here at the final instalment of the Light Collective Lake Air exhibition, and they'll tell you more about it. But if you've got the opportunity to come down, it's open here until next Saturday. Is that right, guys?
That's right.
16th.
Yeah.
The 16th of June. Here in Melbourne, so please come down and support these guys. It's a fantastic exhibition. So we're just going to have a bit of chat about the exhibition, about the Light Collective, and about these guys. So tell me how the Light Collective concept came about.
Well, you can take it because you set it up pretty much.
Yeah, well, I think I was probably struggling a little bit with my creativity, and I was reaching a limit where I couldn't move forward. And I knew a few of you from Facebook and social media, and I thought that collaborating with some great photographers in Australia would it would be a great project, and collaborating on projects and and to learn from you guys would be awesome. So the group was I think I called Adam and Paul initially, and these guys they knew Rick, and and then Rick called Luke. So anyway, it was like that. So
spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it's pretty natural.
So came up with pretty organic the way it all came
was
about.
in the end.
Fantastic.
So it's been amazing. These guys are so creative, and particularly myself, I've just learned so much. Asking about advice for some of my prints or upper prints, or and it's been great. Yeah, I've learned techniques, and so it's been great working with these guys.
I think that's been for all of us. Yeah, that growth, like bringing us together and just seeing what these other guys are doing, just spurs us on. We all try and there's a competitive element in there, so we all try and outdo each other. To a certain degree, we don't kind of acknowledge that that's the case, do we? But it is a little bit. You see something, wow, that's incredible. I need to sort of push myself and lift it up to that level. So I think all of our work over the last, it's been around for nearly 3 years now, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Let's just swap this over because you're talking that way, so that's cool.
Sure.
Go.
Maybe 3 years now. And I think in those 3 years, like as you said, like my work's like improved dramatically through that inspiration from the other guys.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So you guys knew each other before you got together and did the Light Collective, right? Or you knew of each other?
I knew of Adam. We've had a few chats in Facebook, and I knew his work, but we hadn't met in person. I have met with Paul in person.
Right.
And that's about it. Yeah. Right. But I knew the work from Rick and from Paul. Yeah.
Because it's interesting, because landscape photography tends to be a pretty solitary sort of profession or career or hobby, whatever you want to take it. So you'll have people that prefer to either shoot by themselves because they like being outdoors and they like doing it themselves, versus what you're saying, which was like, hold on a second, I want to collaborate with some people and go shooting with these guys, so I am inspired and learn from them. Is that right?
Yeah, it was risky, but it's just worked.
Right.
It's amazing. And it's not only on this photography level, but they're very nice guys. So we have fun together when we travel. Right. It's great. It's just everything. So it's worked really well.
And you have that fantastic video that you did as part of this exhibition that kind of shows that synergy that you guys have and getting along well together, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we have a lot of good times, don't we? Yeah.
So do you catch up outside of these projects that you're doing, or is it just solely on this stuff?
Well, we are pretty busy at the moment with trips, and Adam traveling around Australia, and Paul travels quite a bit as well. Luke is having babies.
I've I've always said the best thing to ruin your landscape photography career is to start a family, and Luke's gone ahead and done that, and you've got kids, and you've got kids.
I got a kid, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then Paul, of course, is just a free spirit.
Yeah. So we have to balance all of that, and
there is a balance.
It's been difficult to meet. Actually, we haven't met on a project, the 5 of us together yet. For Lake Air, it was just the 4 of us. Rick couldn't come.
Yep.
And for the next project, which is about the Great Barrier Reef,
yes.
It's only 4 of us because Luke couldn't come. So it's.
So there's one more. We kind of go back and forth. But there's one more installment after this, isn't there?
Oh, there will be many more. I hope.
But part of the RGB project.
Part of the RGB.
Tell us more about that. The RGB.
Well, the RGB represents the colors of Australia, we believe,
yes.
And the photography as well, are red, green, and blue. And so we thought of dividing the country in 3 different colors, and then do different projects in some of these beautiful locations that also need some help, because we are concerned about the environment and we want to try to help and raise the voice there. So so our next project will be in the Great Barrier Reef, and we are pretty excited about it.
Which you've already shot for, right?
We have photographed it,
And so when does that get released? When do we get to see all those fantastic photographs?
Well, I think we'll start releasing it now. We've been working on the video.
Right.
The video is now complete. So now it's just about setting up the social media launch, I suppose. So we're thinking about doing some sort of crowdfunding style for a book or for some prints or something like that. Not just give us your money type crowdfunding, but print sales and book sales, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
That should hopefully in the next 8 weeks or so. That should. Very nice. It's like going to my high school formal and getting the lapel,
So in the next 8 weeks or so, something.
I would assume,
we just need to find a gallery somewhere, and then from that point, then we'll start.
It's a costly exercise to do all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are specialising in the aerial photography when you're doing these projects?
Well, we have so far. Yeah, these 2 projects have been.
These 2 projects, I mean, the Reef, you can only photograph it, really, and we didn't want to do any underwater.
Well, either underwater or above,
So, and the same with Lake Air. I think, you could go in the lake and spend, some time there and get some great pictures, but we only had a week, so I think aerial photography is what we did there. Yeah. It's very productive.
How did you come about selecting Lake Air in the first place for the first installment?
I can't remember.
There wasn't, look, we were very young as a group. We didn't really, when you start a project and you don't always know what it exactly is going to be about. So we just kind of chose Lake Air because we felt like it hadn't had a huge amount of exposure. So we thought it had a lot of potential, hadn't been exposed on a level that we'd seen before. So we thought we could kind of make it our own to some extent.
We hadn't been there.
And, and we all wanted to go there. And we went there, and again, we went there not particularly thinking about shooting it all from the air, but it just worked out that was the only option when we got there, really, because the roads were so muddy and we had so much rain we couldn't get to the lake itself.
It wasn't ever an intention, you didn't see it being a focus to be an aerial shoot.
No, it wasn't.
But it just happened to turn out that way because you had all that rain.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then from there, the RGB project has now sort of grown or matured from being something where we went there to sort of create a very aesthetically beautiful exhibition like this one here, to being more environmentally aware, I suppose. So we chose the Great Barrier Reef because we believe it's under great threat.
Yep.
And then we're looking at, even further along down the track for our green project, maybe the Tarkine Wilderness Area or something like that, which is also under great threat. So we want to add that weight, I suppose, or that voice to these threatened areas.
Yeah.
More meaningful projects, I guess.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, our video. Look at it.
Woo!
I was keeping an eye on that. Maybe I should put your camera forward on that. What a bummer.
Well, that was went down on a you can make a cut.
We'll have to edit that one out. All right. So tell me then. Tell me a little bit more about your, beginnings in photography. Who wants to go
personally?
First?
Yeah, so I my personal journey, I left school and as you do, all these expectations from, personal, from family, you've got to get a job, you've got to get one quickly, generally. So I ended up falling into the building trade.
Right.
Hated it from day one, stuck it out for I think 17 years. And hated pretty much not hated, but I never woke up one morning and went, you know what, awesome, I get to go to work today. So I did that. That started really grinding me down. I started getting pretty bad anxiety and depression to the point where I was having anxiety every day and panic attacks, once a month, twice a month, to the point where some days I couldn't even go to work. And photography became my escape. And then it became my dream. And then it ultimately became the way that I was going to escape from that world of building and that grind that I didn't enjoy anyway. So what I ended up doing was I spoke to my wife and she's incredibly supportive. I said, look, this is what I think we should do. We'll sell all of our possessions. We sold our house, sold our cars, everything we owned, and we bought a four-wheel drive and a caravan. This was 6 or 7 years ago. And we headed off around Australia for 2 years with my goal of becoming a professional photographer. Now I'm a bit of a dreamer. It didn't work out that way. Not even close. When I got back, I still had to go back to building. But I was in that transition, it had started, so I, eventually kept heading in that direction and figuring out where was going to be the zone that I was actually going to draw an income. Turns out education for me was the place rather than print sales or workshops and these kind of things is what I generally do. But essentially that's it. Just sort of kept heading down that path, kept trying to figure it out the best as I could, and eventually made it there.
Where was your sort of break, in a sense that, there's generally, somewhere along a landscape photography career where you go, well, that's the moment that I knew that I was on the right path, or that was the lucky break that I got, or that was the sort of award that I won that kept me going?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, there was the biggest one. I guess it's competition related, and look, competitions aren't the be all and end all, as we know, but they can certainly teach you a whole bunch. And if you're lucky enough to get a reasonable result in a couple, they can lift your profile at the same time. So the big one for me, probably not so much for profile, but the one that sort of said, "Yep, you're on the right path," was after I got back from this trip around Australia, and I'd headed back into the building game. And I thought I'll sign up for the AIPP for no other reason than, for me, I thought that's what professional photographers did, so I better start doing the stuff that professional photographers do. Fake it till you make it, if you like. And I entered the emerging category that year in state, didn't go so well, ended up taking off about 4 or 5 months from photography and just visualising the kind of work and stories that I wanted to tell. And it ended up being that I wanted to tell more personal stories about my battles with anxiety and depression. Came back, sort of picked up the camera again, and it was right around the time of the APA. And the first 3 images essentially that I produced based on the story of my anxiety and depression, put them into APA, got lucky enough to win the Emerging Photographer of the Year that year. So that sort of confirmed a couple of things. Number one, tell your story. That's the strongest work you're ever going to have. Number two, you're probably on the right path. Keep on going. So it was great affirmation to have that. As I said, it's not, competitions, they can be good, they can be bad, but certainly for me, that certainly kick-started and affirmed that I was on the right path.
So those images that you entered in order to win Emerging Photographer of the Year, how did they reflect the struggle you were going through with anxiety and depression?
Yeah, so I was, as I said, I took that 3-4 months off, and I was looking at the work of people like Andy Lee, you see that dark black series that Andy Lee produces, and there was a few other
UK photography.
Very
dark stuff.
And I'm drawn to that, maybe because there's some darkness inside my head or whatnot. But I thought that's kind of so. Essentially, there's one of Camel Rock, the beautiful Camel Rock. Generally the images in this series. The series is now called Even the Darkest Days. Didn't have a name back then, but it does now. But the series generally contains a strong but isolated subject, so the loneliness is within the subject, isolated from the background or the surroundings, generally surrounded by a heavy darkness, a black fog if you like. Always has dark stormy clouds. The dark stormy clouds I've now come to know as signifying or being a metaphor for the depression.
Yeah.
So they're always in the series. And generally, all bar one image has a shard of light coming through, which represents hope or the breaking of the storms, or you know, that kind of thing. So generally, perfect. So yeah. So I mean, that's where it's at. So generally dark, generally a lonely element through the subject isolation, stormy clouds representing the depression or the dark days, shard of light representing hope. And as I said, there's one image that doesn't have the shard of light, but that particular image, which is called the darkest day, has two little lovebirds which represent the support and love of family in those dark moments. Right. So I mean, that's what I like. That's why my images don't generally represent reality, and a lot of people, until they sort of get that backstory, don't understand where it's coming from. But once they do, they tend to connect with it, and they're not so concerned about reality anymore, because it's more a story of my journey rather than what the landscape looks like in.
So a lot of your work tends to be composite rather than.
Absolutely, yeah. Almost, pretty much all the images in that series will be composite in some way, or you know, have that dark sky dropped in, or the light painted in, or. I mean, that series has now progressed to a point which is a beautiful thing to see for me and the journey for me. But the last three images in that series now have a wash of golden light in them.
Right.
Okay, so the storms are breaking. One of them has a rainbow, which signifies the storms are clearing.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, you can see it goes from very dark, and as I've started to manage that, and a lot of that management has come through talking about it like this, and at workshops about why I do it.
Yeah.
But as I've started to manage that and handle and live with that on a much more comfortable level, the light's come back into the series. So it's rather interesting.
When did you know that you were suffering from depression?
That's a good question. In hindsight, I can now see it as far back to 5 or 6 when I was very, very young, but I didn't know that I had that, and I'm sure a lot of people go through this, although it's more aware now, so people are coming forth with it, you know, as young teenagers and whatnot, but I didn't really realise until I was probably late 20s, I suppose. Right. 25, you know, the grind of work, and I was starting to think, you know, this can't be what life is.
Right.
This is
so dark thoughts.
Yeah, dark thoughts and just
life,
depression and just anxiety and tightness.
Yes.
And stress and all that stuff. And I'm just thinking, you know, I'd go through these thoughts like, oh, this can't be what life is like. I've got to change my work. I've got to quit. I've got to do something else. And photography came around that way. But then I'd go back and I'd think, well, I've got a mortgage and I've got a family. Or maybe everyone just goes through life and hates what they do and just does it to support, you know, to buy the house and support the family. And I'm sure there's a lot of braver people out there than me that just continue to go to work not enjoying it just to make sure that their family is supported. But
there's more to life than that.
I couldn't do it. I don't know what the path would have led me down had I continued down that path. But so photography was, and one thing I'll say actually, and you guys will probably agree with this, is that look, even as a photographer, life's difficult. You know, I find as working as I do now as a professional educator or photographer, whatever you like, look, it's still a grind and it's still hard. So if life's going to be hard, regardless of what you do, you might as well do something that you enjoy. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be hard anyway. So, you know, do something. Now I wake up in the morning and I go, oh, I've got these images to edit, or I've got this to do, and you beauty. It sounds like a fun day. And I might work 14, 16 hours a day.
But at least you're doing what you love.
And I enjoy doing it though. Yeah.
You're doing well, man.
Yeah. How much now do you have the anxiety and depression compared to before?
I know my triggers now, so you know, if I go for a period of too many parties and bad food and alcohol and not enough sleep and not enough exercise and just generally not looking after myself, I can feel it coming on.
Right.
And I've got to sort of take a step back and look after myself, and I can manage it much better. But look, I still get it. You know, I get anxiety in crowds. So last night at the exhibition opening, there was moments where I'm a bit like, what's going on? But yeah, I can get through it. And I understand now that it's not something that's continuous. You know, you go through waves of it. So I just ride it out a little bit.
You know it's not going to last forever.
Yeah, even this morning after we didn't get much sleep, had a few beers last night. I was feeling a bit anxious this morning, but an hour or two later and I'm I'm feeling pretty good again
Right.
now. So yeah, I know it comes and goes, but back when I had it back in building, it was day in, day out. There was no respite, so there was the grind of work, but then there was also that grind of the anxiety and depression and just keep pushing you down, So I got to the point in the end where I just had to quit and take off on the trip.
Had to do something.
Yeah, I just had to change. So, thankfully it all worked out in the end.
And that series that you talked about, is that something that you're still working on, or is that finished now?
No, I think that's going to be a life's project.
Right.
There's about 8 in there at the moment.
8 photographs?
Yeah, I think so. Somewhere between 6 and 8, I'd imagine. But that'll be a life's project. And look, although I said that the golden light's flooding in and it's the happier times are coming through the series now, look, the darkest images are probably not finished as well. I can envisage, in the future that there will be a few more dark days that inspire, some darker posts within that image. Yeah. In fact, there's some stuff that I haven't published yet, which is pretty dark work. In fact, I don't know if I'll ever publish it because it's very personal as well. So, but it's very cathartic to. Here I am talking about it now, but when you first have anxiety and depression, and this will help anyone watching that has it, hopefully, it's not the thing that you want to talk about because it feels like a weakness. But rather than doing that, what I did was push it into my work. So I was communicating on this kind of poetic level, if you like, and without having to go and say, hand up, I'm having trouble with anxiety and depression. I could pour my heart out into this image of metaphors, and that was just like the first steps forward in communicating that I was having some difficulties. So that was a brilliant first step for me because I start pouring that out, and then people started saying, wow, I like this dark imagery. What's it inspired by?
Right, and you can
take that first step.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that I've had a few workshop participants who have told me, and interestingly, I've reflected on this too, that they enjoy their photography so much because it's a release from what they do on a daily basis, such as stressful jobs with being doctors, lawyers, etc. That for them it's just so cathartic, as you said, to get out in the landscape and to be honest, there's this separation from the real world.
Absolutely.
When they're out there, because nothing else comes into their head other
peaceful.
than I'm out there enjoying the environment, I'm creating images. Nothing else is in that headspace other than
exactly.
enjoying
and in fact,
the environment.
On that level, when I do my workshops, and I talk about the stories within landscape photography, I say you don't have to do the stories like I'm doing, but if you're just going to tell reality, I try and encourage people to take that moment, rather than rush in, grab the photo, rush out, process it, put on social media. Try and spend that half an hour and just breathe in the landscape and really absorb it. And that in itself can be very meditative, I suppose, and relaxing. Because rushing in and grabbing it and rushing back out just to get it on social media, that becomes a bit old, and you'll end up, I think, potentially, likes and comments and social media love ends up becoming, it's great in the beginning, but it ends up becoming a bit old, I think, doesn't it? It ends up becoming, you always want more of it, but you can produce that work on another level, on a deeper story.
Do you play music when you are photographing on the field?
I don't, do you?
No, but it's Ansel Adam was doing that. Ansel, when he was photographing, I think he was playing some classical music. So I was thinking an idea for the workshops when you like play some music. And,
sure.
I tell you what, I haven't done it, but I have a workshop participant who does like to play a bit of music when we're out and about, which tends to grind me a bit because I like the solitude.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But recently I went flying with Harold in Iceland to do some aerial work. And he actually pipes music in through your headphones.
Into the headphones, no way.
While you're flying. And that was amazing because I actually find that when I'm shooting my aerials, I can get a bit wound up about it. Sure. As in, I'm not seeing anything, or this is not working out for me, and I'm paying, X dollars an hour to hire this plane or helicopter.
Yeah, I know what that's like.
The pressure comes on, and then that affects sometimes your creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas him just playing this music just really relaxed me, and I was kind of like floating, I was like a bird, just
let it come to you,
it was incredible.
Yeah, I like that idea, absolutely.
Tell me, just transitioning, we'll get on to you in a sec, thanks for being patient. Just transitioning through to now you creating that work.
Yeah.
You've now got an excellent series online where you actually sell some videos, right?
Sure, yeah.
So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so easywayphotography.com.au. My main goal, and again, this is in most of the projects that I ever do, I just sort of get this idea and then just start heading towards it without exactly knowing what it's going to be. So I didn't have the goal. I knew I wanted to teach people Photoshop and creativity. But the end goal has become more clear in the last couple of years since I've launched, and that's to deliver the students creative freedom.
Right.
Okay, so essentially the way I sort of look at creative freedom, two senses. One sense is the ability to create without the tools getting in the way.
Right.
Okay, so if you don't know Photoshop, then potentially you can't get to the end point without those tools getting in the way. And the second point about creative freedom, and I've got a new course I'm working on at the moment, which is probably still 12 months away, a creative course, is the ability to create without having a single consideration for acceptance. Okay?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like without thinking about how many likes you're going to get.
Yeah.
So create right from the heart, from your heart, from your soul. Do it for yourself without a single thought for acceptance. So that's an interesting creative course. I'm not sure how it's going to come together.
Right.
I'm going to take some time in putting that together, but that's what I'm really passionate about now. But the original one that I've got now, which I mentioned already, is, look, there's some great creative stuff in there, but it's essentially teaching any level of photographer the basics of Photoshop and all the tools necessary for creating whatever it is they like, essentially. Yeah, they can take it down. I try not to influence the path. Right. If you want to do reality, or if you want to do fantasy or illustrative, take it wherever you like, essentially. Yeah.
And that's one video, or it's a series?
No, it's 3 courses: a beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and they're all a similar size. They all have about 35 steps of videos within them. So what I did, rather than, because I've bought a lot of education in my time, I like to see what other photographers are doing. But a couple of things annoyed me about the photographers that are producing 2-hour videos. Great content, but when you want to go back and find that little 2-minute segment,
it's impossible to find.
Yeah, it takes you half an hour, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I did was I broke down, I show them at the start, the run through, then we go through every step in a 5-minute segment, very easy to access again. Yeah. And then at the end we run through the whole thing again. Right. So it's all there, but very easy to reference.
Sounds unreal. How do you, I think the biggest struggle that people have that come on my workshops, and I'm sure your workshops as well, they'll look at a photograph and they'll go, I know I can improve this, but I don't know what to do in order to get it to look any better. Sure. So, I think they struggle with having an end point in mind, as in they don't know what it should look like at the end to then work backwards, reverse engineer it to then, know what to do to have it be that.
Sure.
How do you teach that through your?
I do. I've got a little theory that I use. I call it reveal and conceal, and a lot of people use that for masking. But essentially, reveal and conceal for me, and this is the way I like to process, is reveal the interesting elements within the image. So what was the reason why you set your tripod out and went through the effort of getting your camera out in the first place? Yeah. What was it that drew you to the landscape in the first place? So we reveal that, and the way you would reveal is by adding more light, more colour saturation, or more contrast. So more light, colour and contrast will attract the human eye. So that reveals the interesting stuff. And then I just like to conceal the not so interesting stuff. So the rest of it's like the supporting act. So we just darken that down, maybe desaturate it a little bit, remove a little bit of contrast. So you've got those 3 tools, brightness, contrast, colour. By removing any of those, it will allow the elements to sit back and play a supporting role. By increasing any of those, it will allow what you found interesting to sit forward. So I mean, that's probably one of the more basic techniques that I show early on. Right. The reveal and conceal technique, and it tends to work pretty well.
And you're using layers to do all that?
Sure, yeah.
Which a lot of people can find confusing, can't they?
They can, absolutely. That's the foundation of Photoshop. Yeah. And it's one of the first and one of the most important videos.
I've got a theory that if you're going to learn Photoshop and you want to do it well, and you guys are far better at it than what I am, if you know how to use layers, masks, selections, and perhaps even blend modes,
Sure.
you're pretty much going to be able to produce
Absolutely.
anything you want. Is that true? Am I on the money
and
there?
that's
or is
only
there something
like,
else?
I mean, you know Photoshop, but
Yeah.
a lot better than I do, but you only use 10 or 15% of Photoshop.
whole thing, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
using layers, masks, and I don't use a lot of tools when I
Right.
create my
No,
work.
I mean that's
It's pretty simple.
That's the
Okay.
thing. If you open Photoshop as a complete beginner with no idea what all those tools are, you've got 100 tools down here and a 20 odd layers and
Yeah.
a whole bunch of blend modes. But as Iggy said, like we use as landscape photographers about 10%. So that, I mean, you can go on YouTube. Everything that I teach is on YouTube or Google. But it's mixed in with all the other stuff, you know what I mean? But you don't need to learn all of Photoshop. The key is like just learn the 10%
You
that
need
you
to
need
know
at the end of the day.
what do you want to do.
Yeah.
Like in the workshops with clients, like they like a picture. It's like, what do you do? And it's like, no, what do I do? It's like, what do you want to do with that picture? What do you want to get? What do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they don't know because they don't know where they want to go, or sometimes they know where they want to go, but they don't know how to use Photoshop.
That's a great point.
And it's just a few tools.
Right.
Once you give them the tools, and then they have to practice, and then they can. But it takes years until you get that, to create that vision or that, you probably take when you start, you look at your favorite photographers and you take some bits and pieces from different ones.
Yes.
And it takes years to develop your own
Style.
yeah.
Right.
So you take, ideas and then in the end, but it takes it takes quite a few years
a long
until you
time.
get,
Yeah.
and you go through processes as well in your photography, like, I was doing some stuff a few years ago, and now I'm doing something different, and I look at that, and it's like, that's crap, and
Right.
so you change as well through
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
So anyway,
When you come to process your photographs, then are you always knowing where you want to take them and what the final image is going to look like?
sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Like, when I went to Iceland with these guys, I had the vision of some images. Iceland is being photographed to death, and I wanted to. I had some ideas, and it worked. I wanted to encapsulate some of the icons of Iceland in eyes, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But sometimes it happens before you go on a trip. Sometimes it happens when you are photographing. You are photographing, and then you have the idea right there when you're photographing on the field. And sometimes the idea comes when you are on your computer. It's like, oh, I could do this, and then I have this picture from this trip, and I could just mix and do this. Or so it's sometimes before the trip, during the trip, or after the trip. It's for me. So any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, same with me.
And sometimes you have an idea, and and maybe 50% of them don't happen at all because you can't do it. Yeah. So.
How much of your ideas then are inspired by looking at other people's work?
Not anymore. I don't think, but I continue working on. I continue looking at people who have inspired me.
So who is it that inspires you?
Oh, look, different faces. Like I was traveling when I started to travel in '98. I was inspired by Richard Anson because my ex-girlfriend, or my girlfriend at the time, gave me that book. I was like, wow,
Which
like
book
so
was
many.
that?
The Travel Photography, Lonely Planet.
Yes, beautiful.
The
book.
travel photography book. So that was in '97 or something.
Right.
So I went traveling in '98. So that was he was a big inspiration, and through his photography, then I started to know the photographers like Art Wolf, Franz Lantin, and Steve McCurry. So all these guys inspired me a lot. And I was shooting in Southeast Asia and Africa, so it was more like wildlife and people and travel photos. Then I came to Australia, and I was inspired by ND5, Peter Eastway, Christian Fletcher, Tony Hewitt, and Les Walking. Anyway, so these guys, and I started to concentrate more on landscape.
Right.
But when I came in 2007, I had no idea of I have been shooting for quite a while already, like 10 years, but it was more travel stuff, and I was doing stitches and some levels and things like that, but I didn't use layers.
Right.
So I started to get into landscape, and I started to get more into Photoshop.
Yeah.
So 10 years ago.
That was when you came to Australia?
Yeah,
10
that's
years
when
ago?
I came to Australia. And I started to get more into landscape.
Why did you decide Australia was going to be your home then?
Well, I came because because of my wife, and so I had kids, and I love the country, I love the landscapes. But I don't know, home. don't know where it's home, but yeah, I call Australia home now.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So.
Pleasing you have. It's, I read on your website that you've travelled to 80 different countries. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Wow.
or more. Yeah, I'm working on a project now that in 2023 I want to release or publish a book, which will be my 25-year anniversary book, and that's it's going to be a very personal book where I'm going to mix landscapes and wildlife and people and travel photographs. So yeah, and I want to try to reach 100 countries by then. 100 countries. And I think about 1,000 flights. I think I've taken like by that sense. So I just want to and that's about 360 images, which is representing the 360 degrees. So I don't know how. This is just an idea.
Yes.
So I'm trying to and write a story about each particular image. So I don't have a lot of room. If you have been to 100 countries, then you put 3 images or 2 images per country or something.
It's going to be a bloody hard book to edit.
Yeah.
What do you do with all your photographs? Because obviously you've been shooting now for 20 years all over the world, 80 different countries. Do you sell them? What happens with them?
My process is I come from a trip and I process them pretty quickly. If I take 2,000 images on a trip, I probably send to Getty Images. I was with Lonely Planet, and then Lonely Planet was bought by Getty, so I'm with Getty now, and I send 100 or 150 images to Getty. I have nearly 10,000 images now with them.
Right, wow.
So that's for stock. Out of the 100, maybe I like 5 that I retouch a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then, so some go into the final gallery, and maybe one of them goes to the competitions folder. So it's like, that's the process. And with most of them, I spend a minute, and I don't do much. I don't do even layers or anything like that. And then with 5 or 6 of them or 10 of them, I can just be more creative if I see something on the picture. And then some of them even further. So, but that's the process.
Right. And how did you get into the workshop side of things? Like that was how many years ago now?
That was in 2013. I was still working as an engineer.
Yes.
And like Adam, I was struggling. I was for different reasons, I guess, because I was working in the environment, renewable energy field as an engineer, building wind farms and solar projects, but the government was not giving a lot of money into the project, so it was very, very difficult, very frustrating to develop renewable energy projects in Australia. I was working as an engineer in Europe, and it was easier. There were many more projects being built, but here it's just taking too long. It was very frustrating. So I worked in a company for 3 years. I was made redundant. I was depressed as well in the office, like sometimes, like because I wasn't getting anywhere. For different reasons, and as well because I really love photography, and and I was I was just into my computer, like creating stuff, and from my trips, and so I there was something that it wasn't really working when I was in the office. I went to another job as well, and it didn't work again because there was no work in renewable energy. And when I was made redundant for the second time, I decided to let's give it a go to this photography thing that has been.
He didn't get the hint the first time.
No.
It took the universe twice to tell
tap him on the
that
shoulder.
He needed to follow the photography route. Yeah, right.
So I was already working with Lonely Planet then, stock and semi-professionally, so I was just making a little bit of money from that, but nothing like a full-time professional photography. So in '98, when I started photographing, I went to the US with my film camera, and I brought 100 rolls of film. And my I was 22 or 23 then. I can't remember, but my father was like, wow, my biggest client ever, because my father was a photographer, and I went to the shop. Here you go, 100 rolls of film from the trip. And I was like, oh my god, and he didn't have money. He had to pay for that, for the developing of this. And anyway, so that was more like I was more like a tourist. I went to all these locations, saw the Statue of Liberty, click, the Twin Towers, click. But some of the images were good, and and I continued traveling. But from the tourist, I went into more like the traveler, and I went to some of the locations like Egypt, Middle East, Southeast Asia, India, and I really love traveling. So for me, being a photographer has been a process of being a tourist, then a traveler, then a photographer. And now when I go to it's a bit sad, but when I go to the locations now, I go more looking for the picture
than the travel aspect.
Especially because I'm doing a lot of workshops with clients,
Yes.
but when I go on my own, it's different. When I go on my own to a trip, it's more, I feel like more like the traveler in me. I also go and take photos, but yeah, it's not so much about the photography. It's also about the traveling. Yeah, but yeah. So in 2000, what was the question now?
I was talking about how you got into the workshop side of things.
Oh, in the workshops, yeah. So I
2013.
yeah, when I was still working as an engineer, I proposed to Peter Eastwood to come to Patagonia, and he accepted. And I wasn't planning then to go into, you know, full-time professional photography or do workshops at all. So I just wanted to work with him on a workshop, and it worked. And after that, I was made redundant. I was like, well, I'll do one in the Atacama, and I specialize in South America. And after that, I've been doing stuff in Norway with these guys, in Finland, in some other countries. So yeah, and
some amazing places.
yeah. So but it's working. It's it's fun. It's fun, but it's also, you know, with 2 kids, as you know, you travel a lot as well. So sometimes it's hard, you know, to leave them. And it's hard to find the balance between family, friends, and making money as well. And when you go on these trips, it's like, it's not so glamorous sometimes. So it's not so glamorous, and it's hard work. It's hard work.
That's the take-home point for everybody watching, is that you know, it's great to sit down with you guys, and we're all professional landscape photographers in one way, shape, or form. But it's not always the glitz and glamour that it seems. We're not out there just taking pretty pictures and living the dream.
Right.
Some of the time.
It's pretty good, but you can't complain, because
No,
it's
can't
what we
complain.
love to do.
Well, it's that
But
choice we've made as well.
At the same time, it is still, can be a grind some days, can't it?
For sure. Your style, Iggy, is very much one that I admire, because it seems to be very simple and almost minimalistic in its design. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm getting more into that simplistic, minimalistic, compositionally.
Are you shooting more with wide angles or long lenses? Or
Yeah, I was, when I started photographing, I was photographing beautiful landscapes, and I was, you know, sunsets and sunrise, beautiful colors, and beautiful, you know, wide angle, try to get as much of the landscape on the frame. But now when I go on workshops or I photograph on my own, I find myself more with like the long lenses, because then you isolate the subjects, more simple compositions, and that's what I like now, the textures, the patterns, and simple stuff, simple subjects.
So this stuff, you know, is very much down your alley, of course.
Some of these, some of the abstracts, so. And
tell me, there must be a little bit of rivalry between you guys, because you know, you both live in New South Wales and entering the state awards and national awards and stuff.
Not at all.
I don't think so.
How many of state, like, landscape photographer of the year awards have you guys won between you?
We've done okay over the last few years, haven't we? But I think
poor Peter Eastway hasn't got a chance.
He hasn't been entering, luckily. Yeah, well, he did this.
Well, this is why.
He did this year.
Right.
And I'll be honest, there was a little bit of a fear there, because I'd won the preceding couple of years, and I thought, Peter comes back in and just snaps it back up, and then maybe retires, and just to sort of say, well, you know, just watch where you step there, young fellas. You know what I mean?
Respect your elders.
Iggy came through and cleaned up and won 3 or 4 of the categories and the overall. And
well, I have been finalists for 3 years in a